The three moons of Terminus hung like watchful eyes in the copper-colored sky, their gravitational pull creating rippling waves across the endless sea of crimson sand. No natural creature had evolved to survive the extreme radiation levels and temperature fluctuations of this desolate world, which made it the perfect location for disposing of problems the Sarnian Empire preferred to forget. Elandra Voss knelt in the scorching sand, her once pristine white uniform now stained with rust-colored dust, and her own indigo blood. The ceremonial restraints binding her wrists behind her back had cut deep enough to draw blood, but the pain was secondary to the overwhelming knowledge that she was about to die. Lieutenant Commander Elandra Voss intoned the hovering judicial drone, its mechanical voice echoing across the empty wasteland. "You have been found guilty of sedition, violation of the Imperial data protocols, and unauthorized transmission of classified materials. The sentence is abandonment and exposure." Elandra lifted her head, violet eyes flashing defiance despite the certainty of her fate. "I discovered 3 High Admirals selling weapons technology to the Krell Collective. That's treason against the Emperor himself." The drone's optical sensors pulsed dispassionately. "Sentence will now be carried out. May the void claim your spirit." With mechanical precision, the drone fired a projectile into the sand beside her. The small device unfolded and began injecting a hardening compound into the ground around her legs, rapidly encasing her lower body in a concrete-like substance up to her waist. "You can't just leave me here," Elandra shouted, struggling against the rapidly solidifying material. Estimated survival time, 8 hours. Death from exposure and radiation poisoning is expected to be uncomfortable, but efficient. The drone hovered higher, preparing to depart. Attempts to rescue the condemned will be considered aiding in sedition and punishable by identical sentence. As the drone accelerated away, Elandra's struggles weakened. She knew the futility of fighting against Imperial justice. Once sentenced, no one ever returned. Her thoughts turned to her younger sister, Talia, serving on a research vessel in the outer systems. She would never know what had happened to her older sibling. The sun climbed higher in the alien sky, bathing the desert in merciless heat. After 2 hours, Elandra's throat had gone raw from shouting, her skin blistering under the radiation. The neural suppressor collar around her neck prevented her from accessing her natural Sarnian telepathic abilities. Even calling for help mentally was impossible. It was then that she noticed a disturbance on the horizon, a dust cloud moving against the prevailing wind patterns. At first, she thought it might be a sandstorm, but as it drew closer, she recognized the distinctive silhouette of a land vehicle, something that shouldn't exist on this uninhabited planet. The rover slowed as it approached, its weathered exterior covered in solar panels and equipment. For a moment, it simply idled 50 meters away, as though its operator was assessing the situation. Then, with a hydraulic hiss, the side hatch opened, and a figure emerged. Even at a distance, Elandra could tell this was no Sarnian. The being was tall but stockier than her species, moving with a deliberate gait that spoke of higher gravity origins. As the figure approached, she could make out more details. A human, wearing an environment suit with a helmet visor slightly tinted against the glare. "Well," came a deep voice through the suit's external speakers. "This is unexpected." "Are you real?" Elandra croaked, her dehydration making speech difficult. The human stopped a few paces away, studying her predicament with a calculating gaze. "I'm as real as those restraints. Name's Jackson Reed, independent resource surveyor." He gestured at the hardened compound encasing her lower body. "That looks official." "Imperial justice, please," she managed, pride giving way to survival instinct. "Help me." Jackson didn't move immediately. "Helping Imperial fugitives comes with consequences I'm not particularly interested in facing. What exactly did you do?" "Exposed corruption," she whispered. "Weapons smuggling to the Krell. They're selling to our enemies." He seemed to consider this, head tilted slightly. And they buried you for it. Classy. There's a storm coming, she said, glancing at the darkening horizon where swirling clouds of crimson dust were gathering. If you leave me here, I'll die. I'm aware of the storm, Jackson replied evenly. It's why I was securing my equipment when I spotted the drone. You've got about 30 minutes before those winds hit 200 kilometers per hour. He circled around her, examining the hardened compound. This is military-grade quickcrete, designed to resist tampering. Without warning, he pulled out a compact tool from his belt and activated it. A focused beam of energy shot out, cutting into the material with surprising efficiency. Standard issue for core sampling, he explained as he worked. Your empire doesn't have a monopoly on cutting technology. As the compound began to crack, Elandra felt hope rising for the first time since her sentencing. Why are you helping me? Humans aren't exactly allied with Sarnia. Jackson continued working without looking up. Let's just say I have a personal dislike for empires that bury people in deserts for telling the truth. It took 15 minutes of intensive cutting before the compound weakened enough for Elandra to pull herself free. Her legs were numb, and she collapsed immediately, unable to stand. The suppressor collar, she gasped, pointing at the metal band around her neck. It's tracking me. Jackson examined it without touching. Neural inhibitor with a quantum locator. They really didn't want you using those famous Sarnian mind tricks. He checked a device on his wrist. Storm's getting closer. We'll deal with the collar at my shelter. Can you walk? I don't think so, she admitted, trying to force circulation back into her legs. Without further discussion, Jackson lifted her with surprising ease. Sarnians were lighter than humans due to their homeworld's lower gravity, and carried her to the rover. The wind was picking up dramatically now, swirling sand beginning to sting exposed skin. The rover's interior was cluttered with scientific equipment, geological samples, and the organized chaos of someone who lived alone in the field. Jackson secured her in the passenger seat and quickly returned to the driver's position. Terminus is supposed to be uninhabited, Elandra said as he engaged the drive system. Why is a human here alone? Officially, Rare Earth Mineral Survey for Exotech Industries. The rover lurched forward, accelerating away from the approaching storm wall, and unofficially, she pressed. Jackson's eyes remained focused on navigating the increasingly difficult terrain. Everyone's running from something, Lieutenant Commander, even on planets where nobody is supposed to exist. The storm was gaining on them now, a towering wall of crimson fury threatening to engulf the small vehicle. Jackson pushed the rover to its limits, the engine whining in protest as they raced across the alien landscape. We're not going to outrun it, Elandra observed, watching the rear cameras as the storm grew larger. Not trying to outrun it, Jackson replied, steering toward what appeared to be a sheer rock formation rising from the endless dunes. Just need to reach the shelter before it hits. As they approached the rocks, a section of what had appeared to be solid stone slid away, revealing a camouflaged entrance. Jackson guided the rover inside, and the door sealed behind them, just as the first violent gusts slammed against the exterior. The sudden silence was almost disorienting as the rover powered down in what appeared to be a surprisingly sophisticated hangar carved into the rock. Welcome to Outpost Epsilon, Jackson said, removing his helmet to reveal a weather-beaten face with keen gray eyes and short-cropped dark hair flecked with premature silver. It's not exactly imperial luxury, but it's radiation-shielded and storm-proof. Elandra studied him with new wariness. This is no surveyor's temporary camp. No, he agreed, helping her from the vehicle. It's not. And now you have a choice to make, Lieutenant Commander Voss. That collar is still broadcasting your location. The storm will mask the signal temporarily, but once it passes, they'll know exactly where to find you. He gestured toward an equipment-laden workbench. I can try to remove it, but I need to know if you're worth the risk. Elandra met his gaze steadily. The admirals I exposed are selling planet-killer technology to the Krell. Billions of lives are at stake, human worlds included. Is that worth the risk? For the first time, a hint of something other than careful neutrality crossed Jackson's face. "Then let's get that collar off," he said quietly, "before your empire comes looking for both of us." Jackson's shelter was a testament to careful engineering and paranoia. As Elandra followed him deeper into the complex, she noticed the walls were reinforced with a material she didn't recognize, something that blocked not only radiation, but also standard Imperial scanning technology. "This isn't standard human architecture," she observed, running her fingers along the strange, slightly iridescent surface. "It's not," Jackson confirmed, leading her into what appeared to be a combined medical bay and workshop. "Sit here. That collar needs to come off before we do anything else." Elandra perched on the examination table, watching as Jackson gathered tools. The shelter hummed with the sound of environmental systems working overtime to filter out the howling storm outside. Various screens displayed external camera feeds showing nothing but swirling red darkness. "How long will the storm last?" she asked, trying to gauge how much time they had before Imperial forces might investigate her signal. 2 days, maybe 3. Terminus has a unique atmospheric circulation pattern." Jackson returned with an array of precision instruments and scanning devices. "Tilt your head back. I need to see how this thing is connected." Elandra complied, feeling unexpectedly vulnerable as his fingers carefully brushed her neck. The suppressor collar had been designed to be removed only by authorized Imperial technicians, with failsafes that would trigger if tampered with improperly. "I should warn you," she said quietly, "the collar has an antiseptic charge. If triggered, it will release a neurotoxin." Jackson paused, his hands steady. "Were you planning to mention that before or after I started cutting into it?" "I'm mentioning it now," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I didn't exactly have time to provide a technical briefing while buried in Quikrete." A flicker of something, perhaps amusement, crossed his face before vanishing. Fair enough. He activated a handheld scanner that projected a 3-dimensional schematic of the collar above it. Standard Imperial Enforcement Model ST-440. Neural inhibitor paired with tracking beacon and, interesting, a data storage component. "Data storage?" Elandra frowned. "That's not standard. Which means whatever you discovered was important enough that they wanted to keep tabs on exactly what you knew." Jackson studied the schematic with professional detachment. "I can disable it, but I'll need to be careful. The fail-safes are more sophisticated than usual." For the next hour, Jackson worked in concentrated silence, occasionally asking Elandra to move slightly as he systematically bypassed the collar's defense mechanisms. His expertise suggested specialized training far beyond what a simple resource surveyor would possess. "You're not really a surveyor, are you?" she finally asked. His hands remained steady as he carefully isolated another circuit. "Would it make a difference if I wasn't?" "It might determine whether I can trust you." Jackson glanced up briefly. "Trust is a luxury in our current situation, Lieutenant Commander. Right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and that neurotoxin, not to mention Imperial justice. So perhaps we focus on survival first, trust issues second." A soft click sounded as he disengaged another component. "Almost there. This last section is tricky. It's connected directly to the toxin delivery system." Elandra remained perfectly still, aware that the slightest movement could be catastrophic. "If you're not a surveyor, then what are you? Resistance? Mercenary? Let's just say I'm someone who recognizes the value of privacy," Jackson replied, carefully inserting a micro-tool into the collar's housing. With a final precision movement, something disengaged and the collar separated with a hydraulic hiss. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. As the neural suppression lifted, Elandra's telepathic abilities returned in a rush that left her gasping. The world suddenly expanded around her, subtle emotional impressions, thought patterns, the background radiation of consciousness that her species navigated as naturally as humans used sight. And there was something else, a presence in the room with them, watching. "We're not alone," she said, immediately on alert. Jackson set the disabled collar aside, his expression unchanged. "No VA, Protocol 7. A disembodied female voice responded from hidden speakers. "Identity confirmed. Protocol 7 engaged." "Artificial intelligence?" Elandra asked, surprised. "That's restricted technology in most of the known galaxy. Nano VA's more than that," Jackson replied, gathering the tools. "She's my partner." "Co-pilot and tactical advisor would be more accurate, Jackson," the AI corrected. "Our guest presents several security concerns. The Imperial tracking signal has been contained, but not eliminated." "Can you access the data storage from the collar?" Jackson asked. "Processing now. Encryption is substantial. Estimated time to completion, 4 hours, 17 minutes. Elandra rubbed her neck where the collar had been, feeling both relief and new apprehension. "I don't understand. If you're not with the Resistance, why help me? Why risk everything to save an Imperial officer who's been condemned to death?" Jackson studied her for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "NOVA, show her file Omega-6." One of the room's display screens activated, showing a series of images. Orbital scans of a planet, followed by devastating explosions visible from space, then utter devastation. It took Elandra a moment to recognize what she was seeing. "Viridian colony," she whispered. The human settlement had been obliterated 3 years ago in what Imperial intelligence had attributed to a catastrophic reactor meltdown. Over 80,000 colonists had died. "It wasn't an accident," Jackson said, his voice flat. "It was a weapons test. The same technology your admirals are now selling to the Krell." Elandra stared at the images in horror. "How do you know this?" "Because I was there." His expression hardened. "Security consultant for the colony administration. I was off-world when it happened, meeting with investors. Everyone I knew died that day." "That's impossible," she protested. "Our official investigation confirmed it was a reactor failure." "Your official investigation was a cover-up." He gestured at the screen where NOVA had begun displaying technical specifications. "Planet killer technology, designed to trigger catastrophic geological instability, untraceable once deployed, leaving no evidence of external attack." The room fell silent, except for the constant howl of the storm outside. Elandra's mind raced, connecting pieces of information she'd uncovered during her own investigation. "The weapons technology I discovered being sold to the Krell," she said slowly. "The specifications matched nothing in our official arsenal." "Because officially, it doesn't exist," Jackson confirmed. "Just like officially, I died on Viridian along with everyone else." Elandra processed this revelation. "So you've been hunting the people responsible." "For 3 years. Following leads, gathering evidence. When I intercepted communications about Terminus being used as a test site for new variations of the technology, I established this outpost to monitor Imperial activities." "Is that why you're helping me? Because my information could lead you to them?" Jackson's expression remained unreadable. "Let's just say our interests temporarily align." An OVA interrupted their conversation. "Jackson, I've detected an orbital signal breach. An Imperial cruiser has entered the system and is establishing synchronous orbit over this region." Jackson moved immediately to the main console, bringing up sensor displays. "They shouldn't be able to track us through the storm. How did they find us so quickly?" "Unknown. However, they are deploying dropships. Estimated arrival, 6 hours." The collar, Elandra realized. They must have had a secondary tracking system. Something more sophisticated than standard quantum location. "Or you were bait from the beginning," Jackson countered, studying the tactical display. "Lead the troublesome human directly to Imperial forces." Elandra rose indignantly. If I were bait, why would they bury me in Quickcrete and leave me to die? Because they never expected you to die, he replied. They expected me to find you. The real question is, how did they know I was here at all? The implication hung in the air between them. Someone had betrayed Jackson's presence on Terminus. Someone who knew he was hunting the weapons developers. Now VA, begin evacuation protocol. Jackson ordered, already moving with practiced efficiency. Transfer all critical data to the backup servers and prepare the emergency transport. Acknowledged. Evacuation protocol initiated. Elandra watched as sections of the shelter began to systematically shut down, equipment folding into itself for transport. You are running? What about your evidence, your mission? My mission is staying alive long enough to expose the truth. Jackson replied without slowing. Something I can't do if Imperial forces capture or kill me. He tossed her a sealed container. There are provisions inside, along with environmental gear adapted for Sarnian biology. You just happen to have gear for my species? I prepare for contingencies. He accessed a hidden panel, revealing a weapons cache. Can you handle a plasma rifle? I'm a tactical officer, she replied, slightly offended. I can handle any weapon in the Imperial arsenal. Jackson handed her a matte black rifle of unfamiliar design. This isn't in the Imperial arsenal. Power settings on the side. Discharge rate toggle under the grip. It has approximately 30% more kickback than you're used to. Elandra expertly checked the weapon, familiarizing herself with its balance and sighting system. Where exactly are we evacuating to? In case you've forgotten, we're on a hostile planet with Imperial forces incoming. We're taking the emergency transport to my ship, which is hidden in the mountains to the north. He retrieved a data core from the main console. LVA status. Data transfer 87% complete. Dropships have entered atmosphere. Their descent has been slowed by storm conditions, but they are still on approach. Jackson turned to Elandra, his expression deadly serious. I'm offering you a choice, Lieutenant Commander. Come with me, help me expose the weapons program. And the admirals behind it, or stay here. I'll leave you supplies and a communicator. When the Imperials arrive, you can claim I forced you to remove the collar and then abandoned you. They'd never believe that, she said. And even if they did, they'd still execute me for what I know. Probably, he agreed, but it's still a choice. Elandra studied him, her telepathic senses extending cautiously. Though his mind was unusually disciplined for a human, she could sense his underlying determination and a deep, smoldering anger that had driven him for years. But there was no deception, at least not about this. If I help you, she said finally, we do this right. We gather concrete evidence that will stand up to Imperial scrutiny, something even the High Council can't ignore or dismiss. The kind of evidence worth dying for? He asked, watching her intently. Elandra squared her shoulders. The kind of evidence worth living for. Justice doesn't come from martyrdom, Jackson. It comes from survivors who refuse to be silenced. For the first time, a genuine smile crossed his face, small and grim, but real. Then grab what you need. We leave in 10 minutes. As they prepared for evacuation, the storm outside intensified, masking the sounds of the shelter, systematically erasing all evidence of their presence. And somewhere above, through the swirling crimson clouds, Imperial dropships were descending, bringing with them soldiers with orders to ensure no one left Terminus alive. The emergency transport was not what Elandra had expected. Rather than a conventional vehicle, it was a sleek, cylindrical pod barely large enough for 2 occupants, its exterior covered in the same iridescent material as the shelter walls. "This is your evacuation plan?" she asked skeptically as Jackson secured the last of their essential supplies inside. "It's not a luxury cruiser," he admitted, "but it's fast and virtually undetectable. Imperial scanning technology can't penetrate the hull shielding. And how exactly does this get us through a Category 5 sandstorm to your ship? Jackson gestured for her to enter first. It travels underground. Once they were secured inside the cramped space, shoulder to shoulder in acceleration harnesses, Jackson activated the control systems. The pod hummed to life, displays illuminating to show external views and navigational data. "NOVA, transfer complete?" he asked. "Affirmative. All critical data secured. Self-destruct sequence for the outpost is primed and awaiting activation." "You're destroying the shelter?" Elandra asked. "Standard protocol. Leave nothing for them to trace." Jackson finished the pre-launch sequence. "The Imperials want this technology badly enough to send a cruiser after one condemned officer. I'm not giving them any insights into my operation." The pod shifted as mechanical arms positioned it into what Elandra now recognized as a launch tube extending deep into the planet's surface. "Brace yourself," Jackson warned as he initiated the launch sequence. First-time riders find this disorienting. Before she could respond, acceleration slammed them back into their harnesses. The pod shot forward with astonishing speed, dropping into the tunnel system. Terminus's unnatural gravity created a stomach-lurching sensation as they plummeted downward before leveling into a horizontal trajectory. On the displays, Elandra watched a schematic of their path, a complex network of tunnels extending for hundreds of kilometers beneath the surface. "These tunnels," she said once she'd regained her equilibrium, "they're not natural formations." "No," Jackson confirmed, making minor course adjustments. "They're remnants of ancient mining operations. Whatever civilization built them abandoned this planet thousands of years ago. And you just happened to discover them." I followed the evidence. The Empire isn't the first power to exploit terminus for weapons development. He glanced at a proximity alert. "NOVA, status of Imperial forces. Dropships have established a search pattern centered on the outpost coordinates. Ground troops will reach the shelter location in approximately 17 minutes. Detonate when they're inside the perimeter," Jackson instructed. Maximum confusion. Elandra frowned. "You're going to kill them? Those soldiers are just following orders. The charges are designed to collapse the entry points, not destroy the entire structure," he clarified. "It will trap them temporarily, not kill them. I don't execute people for doing their jobs, Lieutenant Commander." The subtle rebuke hung between them as the pod continued its journey through the ancient tunnels. After several minutes of tense silence, Jackson spoke again. "The data from your caller is proving valuable. NOVA has already identified connections to 3 high-level Imperial research facilities involved in the weapons program. Those would be under Admiral Vexus's direct command," Elandra confirmed. "He's the primary architect of the program, according to my investigation." "Vexus," Jackson repeated, his expression darkening. "I've encountered that name before. He visited Viridian Colony 2 weeks before the incident, posing as a trade representative." The pod banked sharply as it navigated a junction in the tunnel system. According to the navigation display, they were now heading toward a mountain range on the northern continent. "Dropships have breached the shelter perimeter," NOVA reported. "Detonation sequence initiated." On one of the displays, surveillance footage showed Imperial troops in environment suits swarming the entrance to the abandoned shelter. Seconds later, controlled explosions collapsed the entry points, sealing the structure. "They'll dig out within hours," Jackson noted, "but it gives us the time we need." They continued in silence for several kilometers before Elandra spoke again. "You've planned this meticulously. 3 years of preparation just to expose the weapons program. Justice for 80,000 dead deserves meticulous planning, don't you think?" There was an edge to his voice that hadn't been there before. "It wasn't just about justice for you, was it?" she asked carefully. "You lost someone on Viridian." For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, without looking at her, he said simply, "My wife. She was the colony's lead geologist." Elandra's telepathic senses detected the wave of grief that accompanied his words, quickly suppressed but powerful nonetheless. "I'm sorry. Save your sympathy for getting this evidence to people who can actually do something about it." His tone was brusque, closing the subject. The pod began to decelerate as they approached what appeared to be a massive cavern system beneath the mountains. The navigation display indicated they were nearing their destination. "These mountains have the highest concentration of ferromagnetic ore on the planet," Jackson explained as the pod slowed to a stop inside a natural chamber. "Creates a permanent dead zone for most scanning technology. The perfect hiding place for a ship." As they exited the pod, Elandra gasped despite herself. The cavern was enormous, easily hundreds of meters high, with stalactites hanging like massive spears from the ceiling. But what dominated the space was the ship. Sleek, predatory lines unlike any vessel she'd seen before, neither imperial nor standard human design. "What is that?" she asked, unable to hide her amazement. "The Phantom. Prototype stealth vessel, officially decommissioned and destroyed after the Cygnus Accords prohibited cloaking technology." Jackson approached a control panel on the cavern wall. "Fortunately, some prototypes have a way of disappearing from inventory during administrative transitions. You stole an experimental military vessel. I prefer liberated." He activated the panel, and lights illuminated a path to the ship's entry ramp. An OVA has been fully integrated into her systems. Together, they're the most advanced stealth vessel in the quadrant. As they approached the ship, the entry ramp extended automatically. The interior was as impressive as the exterior, state-of-the-art systems arranged with ruthless efficiency, every centimeter of space utilized without waste. "Welcome aboard, Jackson," NOVA's voice greeted them as they entered the bridge. "Lieutenant Commander Voss's biometric data has been added to authorized personnel." Jackson took the pilot's seat, beginning the pre-flight sequence with practiced ease. Status of Imperial forces. Cruiser remains in orbit. 3 dropships have converged on the shelter location. Ground troops have begun excavation efforts. A pause. There is also unusual communication activity. They appear to have deployed a specialized containment unit. Jackson frowned. Containment? For what? Unknown. However, the encryption level suggests highest priority extraction protocols. Elandra felt a chill. "They're not just looking for me. They're looking for something specific. The evidence I found." "Which means they don't know exactly what you discovered." Jackson realized. "They're covering their bases." "Pre-flight checks complete," NOVA announced. "Cavern exit can be opened on your command." Jackson turned to Elandra. "Once we break atmosphere, we'll need to decide on a destination. The nearest neutral territory is the Procyon system. 3 days at maximum speed." "No," Elandra said firmly. "We're not running to neutral territory." "You have a better suggestion." "We go to Celestial Station. It's a major hub for Imperial diplomatic operations, with representatives from every major power, including human territories." Jackson stared at her incredulously. "You want to fly straight into Imperial space? To their primary diplomatic installation?" "It's the last place they'll expect us to go," she pointed out. "And more importantly, it's where we can find Director Tanner." "Who is Director Tanner?" "The head of Imperial Internal Security. He reports directly to the Emperor, bypassing the Admiralty entirely. If anyone can act on our evidence without being blocked by Vexus and his allies, it's Tanner." Jackson considered this. "And you trust this director? How do you know he's not part of the conspiracy?" "Because he was my mentor at the Academy," Elandra revealed. "And he was the one who first warned me to investigate discrepancies in weapons shipment manifests. He suspected something, but needed an officer outside his direct command to gather evidence." Understanding dawned on Jackson's face. "So your unauthorized investigation was actually sanctioned at the highest level. But why didn't Tanner intervene when you were sentenced?" "He couldn't without exposing himself. The admirals would have destroyed the evidence and eliminated him too." She leaned forward intently. This was always the plan, Jackson. I would gather the evidence, and if discovered, find a way to get it directly to Tanner. I just hadn't anticipated being buried in Quikrete as part of the process. For the first time since they'd met, Jackson laughed, a short, surprised sound. You Imperial officers and your labyrinthine plots. He shook his head. Fine. Celestial Station it is. But if this goes sideways, I'm getting us out of there. Diplomatic incident be damned. He engaged the ship's primary systems, and the cavern ceiling began to retract, revealing the storm-ravaged sky above. NOVA, initiate stealth protocols and plot a course for Celestial Station. Let's see if the lieutenant commander's faith in her director is justified. The Phantom rose silently from its hiding place, its advanced cloaking systems rendering it invisible to both visual observation and scanning technology. As they ascended through the atmosphere, the Imperial cruiser continued its search pattern, unaware that its quarry was passing within kilometers of its position. Elandra watched the storm-shrouded surface of Terminus recede beneath them. What had begun as her execution had transformed into something far more significant, a mission that could expose corruption at the highest levels of the Empire and prevent technology capable of destroying worlds from falling into the wrong hands. For what it's worth, she said quietly as they prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel, I think your wife would be proud of what you're doing. Jackson's hands stilled momentarily on the controls. Then, without looking at her, he engaged the FTL drive. The stars stretched into brilliant streaks of light as the Phantom leaped forward, carrying them toward an uncertain confrontation that would either bring justice to the dead of Viridian colony or add 2 more names to the list of those silenced in the name of Imperial security. Either way, there would be no turning back.